Hello, dear friends of Kabbalah International. We are once again with Mario Sabán.
How are you, Nacho?
Very well, Mario. Very happy to be here with you again. Today we're discussing dogmatisms. We know that dogmatism is one of the klipo of Binah, an imbalance of Binah. And if you agree, we can start delving into the topic and then proceed with the analysis.
First of all, for those who are probably hearing us for the first time, understand what Binah is, right? The dimension of Binah is the rational mind, the understanding, and therefore what Binah has is control and mental organization. When Binah begins to falter, it starts positioning itself in a safety zone. So, what is a dogma? A dogma is an illusory sense of security, an idea, or several sets of ideas that, in some way, begin to operate as an axis around which all other ideas in your life spin. In other words, they revolve around this dogma or axis. The dogma is an unquestionable idea. For the person following this dogma, it is something that cannot be discussed, lacking critical thinking. There is no critical thinking whatsoever when a person is dogmatic, regardless of their dogma. The characteristic of dogma is that a fragment of reality becomes superior to all other fragments. That's an idea. Within reality, you elevate it to a point, deify it, and idolize it to a degree where all other ideas are relegated to a secondary status. Consequently, all other secondary ideas are perceived as false. This is because, to the dogmatic individual, within this dogma, they believe they have reached the ultimate truth. It's an absolute truth, not in the infinite sense, but confined to a fragment of reality. In this particular idea or series of ideas, there lies the absolute truth. Critical thinking comes to an end. There is no skepticism and no room for questions, and if there are questions, they serve only to camouflage, to reaffirm the dogma. In other words, you can observe an illusion of critical thinking, but fundamentally, there is a suspicion that the dogma governs, let's say, all that analysis. So that thought process lacks true criticality. The dogma is immutable, and the dogmatic individual will go to great lengths to defend it. They may even sacrifice their own life. To defend that dogma, one can both kill and die. That's why dogma is so dangerous. Why? Because once convinced of that dogmatic truth, a person can destroy and come into conflict with others. Therefore, dogma has consequences that are completely anti-spiritual and entirely removed from love for one's neighbor. For the dogmatic individual, love for others is of less importance than the defense of the dogma. In other words, the defense of the dogma takes precedence, and then comes love for one's neighbor. Moreover, if, in any way, one's neighbor disagrees with your dogma, they might need to be annihilated. So, the dogmatic person is a problem primarily because they lack critical thinking. Secondly, because their soul cannot reveal itself. Starting from the refusal to engage in questioning, not opening up to DOGMA, closing themselves off entirely in that safety zone, and then because they become a potential source of conflict with others in defense of that dogma. Imagine when two dogmatic individuals with different dogmas come together. Then we find ourselves in a terrible situation within reality. Kabbalah, in my view, presents a concept that distances us from dogma. Why? Someone might say, well, Kabbalah comes from the Jewish tradition, so wouldn't the Torah be like the dogma of Judaism since it belongs? It's not the case, because the perception of the Torah in Kabbalah is the infinite knowledge of reality. Therefore, as it is the infinite knowledge of reality, the infinite is not a dogma. The infinite is the dissolution of all dogmas because all ideas exist within the matrix of the infinite. There are no superior or inferior ideas, no fragments of absolute truth. which is what the dogmatic person is doing. Therefore, it is a contradiction for someone to come and say, well, you understand that the infinite is a dogma. No, it's not. The infinite destroys all possibility of a dogma trying in some way to assert its supremacy over all fragments.
We can say that the closed circuit of dogma is a condemnation to ignorance.
The dogmatic person is an ignorant individual. Why are they ignorant? Because they ignore the workings of reality. The dogmatic person is ignorant because they fail to comprehend that each fragment is fulfilling a valuable function, and it's not the case that there are fragments that are senseless, while their dogma is the only thing that makes sense. When a dogmatic person takes a dogma and declares, "This is the only thing that makes sense because I have found the absolute truth," everything else either falls under that dogma, is subordinate to the dogma, or is considered falsehood. In other words, a religious dogmatic person who proclaims a dogma asserts that anyone not adhering to this dogma is outside salvation and condemned to hell. The dogmatic individual declares that the path to paradise is through their dogma, and therefore everyone outside it, and this not only happens in religious terms, but also in ideological terms, where a single point of reality is exalted. What also occurs, Nacho, is that there not only exists a dogma for a specific idea, but there are also dogmatic systems where in a circular manner. There are 3 or 4 fundamental ideas that are interlocking with each other. Major theological frameworks are interweavings of ideas that close in on themselves, returning to the same point. So it becomes much more challenging to somehow confront dogmatism in these cases, because dogmatism gives the illusion of dynamism as it moves within that circle. When you approach that dogma, the dogmatic person is circulating within the dogmatic system, and they shift to another dogma, justifying the previous one. So you go to this dogma, and they've already shifted to another dogma. It's like a dogmatic person in the system slipping away into a series of 10, 7, or however many closed dogmas. Additionally, it confuses the dogmatic person within the system because it seems like they are creating critical thinking. It appears as though they are thinking, but all they are doing is leading you from one point to another within the dogma. So this also needs to be considered because it's a trap of the dogmatic person. It's a more sophisticated form of dogmatism.
It's the dogma of polydogmatism.
It's polydogmatism indeed. It's a polydogmatism where the true dogma is the system that these dogmas have created. It means it's a dogmatic system with various dogmas that interlock. You're having a good time because you are realizing...
Yes, realizing how it works.
Exactly how it works.
What I found interesting was to delve a bit into the root of the creation of dogma and how dogma is related to security systems, primarily rooted in fear.
Absolutely. You see, every dogma requires another dogmatic response to address it, which is why it keeps interlocking. Be cautious about stepping outside this system. Be cautious about stepping outside this dogma, because then you have lost communication with divinity, the dogmatic person tells you. Therefore, oh, how frightening for the soul. They place you in a situation of disconnection from divinity. But no, it's the dogmatic person who is disconnected from divinity, because in reality, the dogmatic person is putting forth a dogma that blocks their connection with divinity, the perversity of the dogmatic system. Knowing that the dogmatic person is cut off from divinity due to their blockage, through that blockage imposed by the dogma, they project onto others their inability to communicate because they don't follow the same path. Yet we clearly understand in the tradition of Kabbalah, as Isaac Luria stated, that each soul has its letter in the Torah. In other words, each soul has its path. Therefore, if every soul has its path, there isn't a dogma that makes you walk in a specific direction. It's not that salvation is found by following a set path. Additionally, the concept of finding salvation through religious means is also another contradiction, because the question one may ask, from a historical perspective, one may ask, did nobody get saved before the birth of these religions? In other words, did people only start getting saved when this dogma was discovered? It implies that in the pre-religious history of all our religions, everyone went to hell. It's a contradiction. Common sense falters, and mysticism brings a radical honesty to these situations that lean more towards superstition than spirituality.
Furthermore, if someone has to save us, it would lead us to deduce that in reality, we are living in hell.
Not only that, but if someone has to save us, it also implies that we are completely powerless because God made us powerless by definition. This would mean we are talking about a macabre God, as it is a God who renders me powerless only to send a messenger for my redemption. It is a contradiction at its core. God gives me the strength for my own redemption, not depending on a being who will come to save me. Unfortunately, this speculation in Christianity is introduced by St. Paul, whom I admire, as you know, but he made a significant mistake from the very beginning because he placed salvation outside when salvation is entirely within. It is the teshuvah, it is the return. And look, if we turn to Yeshua of Nazareth did not believe in what Paul introduced, because what did he say to the adulteress after they were going to stone her and ultimately did not? Go and sin no more. The teshuvah can be done by you. He is not saying, I will save you through my death. He is saying, go and sin no more. This means that the Judaism in Yeshua is very different from Pauline theology, which brings someone from the outside for salvation.
I open a door for us to work on the next topic, if you agree, which is related to what you are saying, that is the control of thought by religious power. Thank you, Mario.
Excellent.